Hello, everyone, and welcome to part three of our kayak fishing webinar series. So, just a few reminders this is being recorded and it is streaming live on YouTube. So, if you don't want to show your face or anything, make sure your camera's turned off and muted. Please put all your questions in the chat, and if we have time, we can unmute and talk and discuss things. And remember, if you've missed any of the previous ones, I know this one's been kind of spread out with some stuff happening, unforeseen circumstances that we had to deal with. But all the recordings are up on YouTube, and we actually went back and got new film and footage for the Canoe Kentucky version where the audio was not very great. So there's a new version of that up on YouTube as well. And that's all on the department's YouTube page. So go back and check those out. So I will hand it over now to Lee McClellan, who is our expert on float trips and how to plan one. And it's probably been on more float trips than I've ever dreamed of. So Lee, take it away.
All right. First of all, a lot of people have gotten into kayak fishing in the last couple of years. The COVID pandemic had a little bit to do with that. Some of it has to do with the fact that kayaks are getting more affordable as boats get more expensive, but it's really, really booming right now. So one of the things that people don't consider is planning. We've had some issues with some people over the past couple of years. Some didn't turn out well. There was a recent one on North Elkhorn here earlier this summer that didn't turn out well. And a lot of it is just plain old inexperience. So if you're planning a float trip for the first time and you're starting to get into kayaking, there's a very easy way to prepare yourself before going out. One of the first things to do is we have tremendous resources on our website and also on other websites that you can look and study and get a feel for what you're about to do. I think a lot of people go to the department store, they buy the family some inexpensive kayaks, and they head to the stream. Not having any experience, not knowing what's high, what's average, and what's low on flow conditions. And sometimes they get in over their head. So we're going to do a little screen share and show you some of the things that are really, really good that we have on our webpage that will help you. First, we have this wonderful page called the Canoeing and Kayaking page. It's full of great stuff. There's a link here to where to boat in Kentucky, but that shows all the accesses for motorboats, carry downs, everything on streams and on lakes all over Kentucky. I use it all the time in the performance of my job. But one of the first to look at is I just clicked on it. I hope you can see it. Is Kentucky Stream Fisheries, and what our fisheries biologists done. I've helped them with it a little bit, but they've done most of this on their own. Is they've went through and shown what they find when they're out there doing stream sampling, and they've compiled it into a very, very useful package of information. I'm just going to click on Elkhorn Creek because it was the first one. But when you click on here, first there's a map right there you can see of all the stream accesses. That is excellent information for you to know. There's also pictures of what they found in the creek when they've done some sampling. There's also incredibly good stuff right here with river miles. What are you getting into? How long is it going to take? Start looking at this. We'll talk more about distances here later on in the presentation. Like Elkhorn campground, the VPA is 5 miles. American Whitewater to T. N. Sullivan's 1.3. American Whitewater to the Fight for Fish hatchery is around 6. To the main takeout there around Peaks Mill is around 5. Another wonderful thing there is recommended river levels for boating and fishing for Elkhorn. So we're going to look at the USGS gauge here in a second, and that'll give you an idea. Some people put in, and they may not know that 800 CFS is dangerous. They don't know. There's a saying, if you arrive at the stream and if it's flowing brown, turn around, because that's nothing but danger, especially if you're inexperienced. I don't put in if it's muddy and blown out like that. I like to fish, but if you catch a log going that fast in muddy water and you don't see it and you're going sideways, you'll flip quicker than you can say Jiminy Christmas. So no one wants to flip in high muddy water and lose their stuff. So one of the things you need to think about is a couple of backup plans if your stream is blown out, but you don't have to drive and look if you look on these wonderful resources here. Another thing they have, you can see, these are pictures of the access spots. Incredibly nice to know. This is the one there. It's for what we call the gorge float. This is where you have to pay for this one at Elkhorn Campground. But you put in here and you take out at what we call Softly's Bottoms. I call Church's Grove. And that's the most scenic and whitewater part of Elkhorn. Then the VPA 3 is what we call Church's Grove or Softly's Bottoms. That's the takeout. The American Whitewater is public. You can put in there. You can go to T.M. Sullivan. I wouldn't recommend it because it's only about a mile. But you could take out there. See this road here on the left that looks like a Pioneer Wagon Road? It's because it is a Pioneer Wagon Road. This is very, very old crossing of Elkhorn Creek. But carrying your boat up there is a chore. So the Elkhorn VPA number 1 and that one you cannot take out. You can only weigh there. So you can go on down to Pfeiffer Fish Hatchery. If you get there before 3 o'clock, you can drive down and take out your boat. So this comes in incredibly handy. So another excellent resource is the U.S. Geological Survey. This is the one. I'm going to click on the one for Elkhorn Creek. But you go to this, and it'll show you the current flow data on Elkhorn. And it's very important. This, if you go up here and go to Kentucky and just hit current conditions on Kentucky, it'll bring you to the statewide stream flow table. You can see the map there. Click on the statewide stream flow table. And then these are the ones that are in Indiana, the Ohio River main stem, the Big Sandy River Basin, Little Sandy Licking. You have to scroll down. The Kentucky River Basin has all the main streams in the Kentucky River Basin. If you go down, there's Elkhorn Creek near Frankfort. It's flowing at 202 CFS. CFS is an expression of cubic feet per second. That's how much water flows by the gauge in 1 second. There's a gauge there at Knight's Bridge. You can see it when you're down there. And it goes down into the water, and the stream flows by it, and it transfers this information back to the website. So, as you can see, you go down, this is what it's been this week. June 22nd, it wouldn't have been good to be floating because the CFS was nearly 2,000. That means blown out, muddy, high, swift, dangerous water, stay away. But now we've not had any rain. As you can see over the week, it's now down to about its average. If you notice right here, that little diamond, or that little triangle rather, that is the median. That means the midpoint of flows over, this is based on 81 years of data. So the average flow on June 29th from 81 years of data is just a little bit below 200 CFS. Perfect floating conditions. A friend of mine's floating there right now. So great conditions to fish. 200 on the Elkhorn. I love 150 to about 400 CFS for fishing and for safe boating. You can go from 400 to about 700 just straight paddling. After that, it gets blown out and a little bit dangerous. So you can also see the gauge height. So you can see it was around 3 1/4, jumped up to 5 feet. Now it's back down to less than 3 feet. So that really helps you when you're trying to plan a trip. So if you see that your current flow is way above that diamond, like it was on the chart a minute ago, you can guarantee that it's blown out, muddy, and nasty. Now, if the diamond or the triangle rather is below the midpoint, like the flow rather is below that midpoint, you can expect low and clear conditions. That's usually thumbs up, good fishing, good paddling. I'd rather it be a little bit low and clear, especially for fishing, than I would be muddy and high. Because you might have to drag your boat low and clear, but you don't have to worry about strainers, flipping and all that nearly as much as you do in a muddy, blown out creek. Again, if it's flowing brown, turn around. Another thing on our website, I take particular pride in because I wrote all of them. Shameless plug, I apologize. I've done 36 different floats on the Blue Water Trails page. That guy's J.K. McKnight. That's on Floyd's Fork. I was paddling with him that day. And we have 36 different floats as you go down, and a couple of videos. One that we did on Elkhorn Creek for a Blue Water, for a magazine article I did with an author named Richard Taylor, and another on the Tug Fork for Blue Water Trails I did up there. The Tug Fork is in Pike County, and it's right in the middle of the Hatfield McCoy feud country. So you click on these, and let's go to Elkhorn Creek again. This one is a magazine article I wrote that we've put in the Blue Water Trails page. You go down, pretty pictures, but if you keep scrolling, you get to the really important part. This is the map. It shows you the different put-ins, takeouts, and mileages. And one of the things we're going to talk about later is planning. You really need to study a map and study satellite imagery if you're floating something for the first time. We'll get into that more here in just a bit. So we also come with this is an older style one that I did that was just straight. But one of the things I want to show you is each one, if it's contained in a magazine article or if we did a map, we have a printable map. You can see Blue Water Trails, South Fork, Licking River. And one of the things I wanted to warn you about is South Licking has a lot of low head dams. And these black marks you see on the map right there above Cynthiana, there's one there at Terry Dam. There's another here at what they call A. Keller Dam. There's another at Poindexter. There's another at Robinson Dam. And then there's another at Berry. So when you're floating South Licking, really the only safe float now is Lair to Terry Dam, just about. You do not want to mess with low head dams. And we'll get more into that here in a little while, because they are the most dangerous structures you will encounter floating. They're no good at all. Again, low head dam's taken the life of someone earlier this summer. 2 years ago here at Elkhorn, that dam's been removed recently. A guy got caught in a low head dam. He held on for as long as he could. His buddies were pulling him with the rope, could not break free. And we'll get into the reasons for that here more in a little while. So, study, look at the flow. I had a good friend a couple of weeks ago, floated the Elkhorn at 2100 CFS. He didn't even look. They're just like, well, we're going to go float. Didn't look. They made it, but it was hair. So study this. That way you'll save yourself some time. You don't want to go to a blown out, brown, gross river with crap floating in the middle of it. No one wants that. So do your planning, and then you can have a stress-free time. So that's a lot easier to explain when I can show it instead of having to do it on my own. Okay. Now, the things that you should also consider as you plan. The satellite images on Google Maps are excellent. Like the map that we have up right now here on South Fork Licking River. If you look at this Google Maps in the satellite imagery, you can see those scary low head dams. You can see things flowing away. You can see the turbulence. You can see those. You want to avoid these dangerous places, because what happens if you encounter a low head dam is if you don't put in, you can, one, go over it and you're likely dead. Two, a lot of times there's nowhere to portage. You just hear a roar. If you see a horizontal line on a place you're not familiar with and you hear a roar, get to the bank immediately, because there's a good chance that's a low head dam. A lot of times you'll see little abutments on the side, okay, of the dam. And when you see those, get over and get out. And put in, well, if you have to portage one, put in well below, because as water flows over that low head dam, it creates what is known as a keeper hydraulic, a turbulent area where it will reach out well from the dam and has a reverse current. And if your boat gets in that, you can be Arnold Schwarzenegger, you could be an NFL all-pro offensive lineman, you could be the strongest person on earth, you're not getting out of it, okay? The water is much stronger than your feeble body. And it will, the scariest, I just couldn't imagine, it will pull your boat and you slowly back into the dam, and then it'll pull you under the waterfall and flip you around and likely drown you. Some people get lucky and get kicked free. That rarely happens though. So again, avoid low head dams. Now, one of the things on this map that I find interesting is when you're planning, like if I've done this layer to Terry Dam, it's great. So one of the things you want to look for, these purple little squiggly lines denote power lines. You want to embed in your memory by looking at the satellite imagery and looking at the map. If you're floating a place for the first time, embed in your mind these different landmarks, saying, hey, I remember looking at the map that there was a power line about halfway through the float, because that gives you visual references and visual tricks for your mind to follow to keep you in the game and keep you moving, and also alleviate stress of how far do I have to go? That is the number one thing, is how far do I have to go? So if you study and you see power lines, you see bridges, especially look for those that are close to the takeout. Then it's like, hey, there's the bridge. The map showed that the takeout was just around the next bend on the right. So commit that to your memory. That way you don't have all that stress, because there's nothing worse than getting panicky. It's late in the day. You haven't, you pulled over, you had lunch, you slammed, you fished, you're having a great time, but you really haven't kept track of how far you went. And it's getting 5 o'clock in the afternoon and you have no idea how much longer you have to go. If you study your maps, then you'll know. If you look at the satellite imagery, you'll know. It's like, oh, that power line, there was a power line early, there's a bridge, and then there's another power line just above the takeout. Okay, we hit the bridge, we're halfway through. Then you can relax. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, we're halfway through, we need to step it up and get on it before dark. One of the things that you must avoid in planning is you never, ever want to float in the dark. You don't want to do it. It's scary. You cannot judge how deep the water is at night. You can have the best flashlight on the market. It won't tell you how deep it is. Believe me, I've screwed up and I've dark floated and I've been panic stricken thinking I've blown the takeout, wondering how I'm going to survive the night without enough water or food. I've had all these thoughts go on. I've made mistakes. So believe me, you don't want dark floating. Can you imagine at pitch black and you've got a weak flashlight and you've got to navigate a pretty hairy rapid and try to pick a line and avoid rocks and avoid flipping when it's pitch black? It doesn't go well. So no one wants to be trying to pick up their stuff after flipping at 10 o'clock at night, going to a takeout, you don't know where it is. So I've been there, I've done that. Avoid it, avoid it, avoid it. And the way you avoid dark floating is planning and getting on the water early enough. So one of the things that people ask me the most is, Lee, I mean, how long does it take to float 8 miles? Well, that varies. 8 miles may take someone in a performance kayak who's really good with paddle skills. 8 miles may take them 3 hours. But someone like me who's fishing, pulling over, taking it easy and enjoying the day, likely spots, beach the boat, get out and wade fish, go over for lunch, do a little swimming and chilling. 8 miles is going to take me all day. Now, on Elkhorn Creek, for example, Nathan Deppenbrock, who's co-owner of Canoe Kentucky, he's a good friend of mine. The most popular float is from what people know as Knight's Bridge down to the community of Peaksmith. So when you are doing that float, he recommends 2 to 3 hours, which I usually put on at between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and they close at 5 if I'm taking out there, because I bought a boat there so I can take out. or I go on down to the bridge. There's an access spot there. It's quasi-public. A lot of people use it, but that's another mile down the street. I struggle to get there by 5, and I put in at 9. So it takes him 3 hours. It takes me 6.5, 7. If I'm doing an even longer float and I'm doing more fishing, it may be 7 or 8 before I get off the water. However, if you go paddle straight, it'll take you 3 or 4 hours. But if you want a picnic, you want to take your time, you want to enjoy yourself, then plan on having more time than you think. It's better to take out at 6:30 and be like, oh, I guess we took out early, than to take out at 10 in a blind panic. Because I've been there and I've done that. One time I was in Arkansas, and I have some good friends who I think the world of, but they're slow starters in the morning. Let's just put it that way. They enjoy their cigars, they enjoy coffee, they enjoy stories, they like a good breakfast. And we put on late on a float we've never done, and it was nearly 8 miles. It gets to be 8:39-ish, light is getting dim, and I have no idea where my truck is. I have no idea about the takeout they gave. It said, you're going to go by a big tributary. The takeout's on the left right after that. So we went by a trib. We didn't see a takeout. Then we realized, oh, we went by another trib. It's getting to be 9 o'clock. It's dark. I've got one little flashlight. So after that, my heart rate is pretty high. I just start taking my key fob and going boink, boink, about every 150 yards, boink. And finally my truck lit up, and the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders, because I was like, the next takeout is 9 miles. And some of the rapids through there borderline class 2, which is hairy, especially at 12:30 at night. So we were wondering, how are we going to pool our food? How are we going to have enough water to get through the night? Should we go up to a farmer's house? I mean, all kinds of things were going through the mind, because we didn't get going early enough. We, putzed around, and it bit us. So it's better to take out an hour early than 2 hours late. So again, plan. So my general rule is, if you're going to fish, you want to keep that float 6 miles or less. For me, but I like to pull over a lot. If you just want to cast and paddle, then you can go up to about 8 miles. But if you're doing this, 8 miles is about all you want for a day. Now, some people they'll paddle 12 miles in a day, but that's in a more of a touring kayak that's built for speed. Most of our streams here, and detailed here on the Blue Water Trails page, you will want to keep it to 8 miles or less if you're going to fish leisurely. If you're going to hardcore fish 6 miles or less, I mean, I've spent all day doing 4.5 miles, put in at daybreak and take out at dusk, and I've only covered 4.5, 5 miles. So if you're into the fishing, plan on 6 miles or less. If you're paddling while fishing or fishing while paddling, 8 miles. You don't want to go much over that until you get more experience. Okay. When you're paddling, you need to have a clock in your head constantly telling you to get moving. I have a good friend, I love him to death. He's the one who's fishing right now. He'll park 50 yards downstream from the takeout and fish for an hour and a half. So the rest of the day, we're playing catch up. And I can't get him moving sometimes. He'll be out of sight. I can't get him going to save my life. So a lot of times when I'm floating with him, I'm in trouble with the wife when I get home. So, again, clock, look for landmarks, study your map, study your satellite imagery, and if it's flowing brown, turn around and go home. Okay, hold on a second.
Hey, Lee, I got a quick question for you.
Yes.
So, one, you might want to stop sharing your screen so we can see your paddles better.
Okay, good. And I'm a rookie. Good. I'll stop sharing. Okay. All right, good.
And we had a question. Is there any way to know / estimate how long a trip is going to take? Like, you say general fishing plan. So you're going to float 6 miles. You plan on leisurely fishing. Your rough estimate would be what? How would you determine that? A mile is this long?
Again, one of the things I meant to say also is a lot of websites and books that are about paddling assume you're straight paddling and not fishing. So they'll often give you really, really inaccurate times. So again, that's up to you as well, but 6 miles, I would plan 6-7 hours. If you're going to fish fairly hard and paddle 6 miles, 6 or 7 hours, but I would give myself 8 so that way I've got a little time to judge it. 8 miles, that's in summer. If I'm fishing hard and I'm covering 8 miles, I want to be on the water not a whole lot long after daybreak, and I'm going to plan to take out at dusk. Okay. Now, again, 4 miles, if you just want to fish real quick, 5 miles can take 4 hours. It really depends upon your pace. But as a general rule, if I'm going to fish 4 to 6 miles, it's going to take me a minimum of 6 hours to make that float. But then again, I fish a lot. If you're just casually going along and casting occasionally and paddling with your spouse or with a friend or with a family member, then you can do it in 4 hours, 5. But it's better to plan on taking 5 and only take 3.5 than it is to take 5 and end up taking 8 hours. So again, it's up to you. That's why the map study and the satellite imagery study is so important if you're floating an area for the first time. Or if you haven't floated for a long time and you can't remember, that way you'll know those landmarks and it'll put you in your head, oh my God, we've only been going 3 hours and I'm at that power line. That's the only power line on this float. And it was only a mile above the takeout. We're going to be done in an hour. So by map study, it keeps the anxiety and stress level down. That's why looking at bends, looking at bridges, power lines, buildings, if you can see, anything that'll give you a judge. But generally, 6 miles or less, plan on a minimum of 6 hours. If you're a hardcore fisherman, you can do it in 4 if you're just casually paddling. 8 miles, plan on all day. If you're going to fish, you can make 8 miles in 5-6 hours if you're fishing while paddling, and you may make better time. If the river's up a little bit and moving faster, you'll make better time than if it's low and clear. So all these things are relative. That's why map study and studying the satellite imagery is so important, because it alleviates the stress.
So would you suggest, like, as a first timer, to try a shorter trip and give yourself excessive time?
I try 4 to 6 miles first time.
Okay.
If you get done earlier than you thought, you're like, oh man, it's only 5 o'clock and I'm done. Well, then you've learned a lesson. Next time, you can fish more when you do that float again. And if you're inexperienced, do a float and then do it again a couple of times just to get the basics down. Okay. That's what's happened with these people that had to be rescued. There was a family on Taylorsville tailwater a couple of years ago. They didn't know. It was way up. They got pushed immediately into the trees. They had to be rescued out of trees. They lost all their boats. It was a disaster. And it was just simply inexperience. So also, if you've never paddled, go on a shallow part of the stream that is placid, or a small lake around the boat ramp, and just get used to paddling. And we're going to talk about paddling and proper grip here in just a second, but just get used to your boat. Each canoe, or rather each kayak, is going to have what is called secondary stability. And at first it feels like, oh, it's tippy, I'm going to flip. No, you've got to have some maneuverability, because if it's too rigid, when you hit turbulent water, over you go. And then you're picking up your wallet. And I had a friend of mine that went on the first date with this girl, and the people were mean on Elkhorn, and they told him to go the wrong way, and they did, and they flipped. She lost her purse. He lost his wallet. It was a disaster. So you don't want to do that. So get out and practice a little bit before you hit moving water, okay? And get on a boat ramp in maybe 2 feet of water and intentionally flip your kayak. Row it all the way over and flip that bad boy. So now you know how far you can go on your secondary stability, because this is important. A boat will hit a certain degree, then it's going to catch. But if you keep going over that, you're done. You're flipping. So get used to where your secondary stability is and flip on purpose. That way you know what it feels like. That way you know how you can bail your boat out and all that in case it happens. Because if you paddle long enough, you're going to flip eventually. So if you practice before you go out, you can keep those to a minimum, or maybe not at all. So go to a boat ramp on a lake, paddle around a little bit, or a stream section that's shallow and doesn't have much current, paddle and flip your boat intentionally. That way you can get used to what it feels like.
Thanks, Lee. I got no more questions. You can carry on with your.
Shall we go on?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is my well-worn, beat-up been through many miles of stream. This is a Werner paddle. It's a fairly expensive brand. I love it. It's been a great paddle. I'm not trying to promote any particular brand. But this is what is called a low angle paddle. So there's three main types, but two main of kayaks. One is a sit inside. That's the cockpit style. They're usually cheaper. They're not as comfortable. And if you get in moving water where there's some standing waves, you can have pour over into your cockpit and take on water. They're a good choice if you're mainly going to do, you don't want to spend a lot of money, you're not going to do it a ton, and you're going to do mainly flat water. I have good friends who have sit insides, and they float streams with me all the time. So they can work, but you can get some pour over. The other kind is a sit on top, in which you have scupper holes, in which if you have a big wave break on you, it's going to self-bail. Sit on tops are my favorite. And if you plan to fish and fish mainly streams, and you like to fish, a sit on top is your best choice. They also make a really good choice if you like to fish flat water. And the self-bailing feature is nice. However, you got to strap everything down in the sit on top. Storage isn't as much as it is in the sit inside. Now I have another kayak, which is a hybrid, which is a sit inside, but the cockpit is really big. So it paddles and fishes like a sit on top, but with more storage. And it has some of the stability you'll find in the sit inside. And my center of gravity is lower there. So, and I love it. It's a heavy boat. And if I know I'm going on some fairly significant water that has some pretty good rapids, then I'm going to take my old sit on top, because I've had waves break at my neck and about knock me out of the boat. And within 3 strokes, the boat it's self-bail. By the time I make 3 more paddle strokes, the boat's back to normal. So that's what you want. They're great. Sit on tops are one. So this low angle paddle, you notice that it is long and thinner. That's for paddling at an angle on the sit on top, kind of like at this angle. Not now a sit inside or a hybrid, you're going to have a more what is known as a broader paddle. That is called a high angle paddle. But really, overall, you can get away with a low angle paddle for almost all your needs. But some are shorter and stubby, and those are high angle paddles. However, they all have this wonderful curve. I've seen so many commercials. It drives me nuts that people are paddling with their blade upside down like that. Or you don't want that part hitting the water first. You want this part. See, you want that water to come here and then go up the top. And you notice that wonderful curve there. That's like an ice cream scoop. So when you're paddling this way, that curve is going to move more water. Yet here's a spoon. I see people paddling with the spoon side, this rounded side, facing. So the water is not getting the propulsion. You're doing like that. That's not going to do. If you want to grab water, you want the scoopy side grabbing the water. So I see the people, and I also see the good old up, not only that's upside down, but the one I really love is upside down and backwards, where they're paddling with this. This is facing and it's upside down. That drives me crazy. You want your kayak paddle, this part here, you should be able to read when you're paddling. See the Werner here? You should be able to read your manufacturer, because it's this way toward the water. That's the way you want it, this way, not that way. Now, some cheaper paddles have kind of uniform, and I'll get to your question, Rachel, here in a second, are more uniform, and they're cheaper. They don't matter because they're the same on both ends. But most of your paddles are going to have curvature, and they're going to have a lower side that needs to strike the water first, and a top side, because this is going to, as it goes down, this is going to grab more water and move you faster with less effort, not upside down and backwards. Okay. That's just a pet peeve of mine. I apologize. Now, some kayak paddles, the cheaper ones, don't have this, but this is going to be a little bit difficult to do. This is called feathering. You may have seen right here these little numbers. Now, There's left and right. I have pull, straight, left and right. I'm right-handed. So when I'm going on Elkhorn Creek, I like to have my feathering set, if I can ever get it to work, set on, this is 30 degrees. Now this is a lot of them only have 3 buttons here. It's 60, neutral, and 60 right. So I'm right-handed. You'll want it 30 degrees for moving water. That's my preference. But when you're hitting, like I'm going to Elmer Davis Lake to bass fish, I'll put it at 45 degrees right, because that makes the blade more parallel when you're doing flat water paddling. So that's where this joint is called feathering. Okay. And then your little button right here, you push that, you pull it apart, and these little numbers denote. So I'm going to put it up there. These little numbers right here. See, there's straight, there's left, and then you'll see L. That's R. And then now that's left. There's R, L. That goes around. That's right. So I go 45 degrees, or when I'm flat water paddling, or 30 degrees right. Okay. So some of them have 3 buttons. The bottom one's usually right. So feather that. Feathering's better when you're on flat water. It doesn't make as much a difference on moving water, but feathering is good on flat water. Now, Rachel, you asked, what would be a good lake in the Louisville area to go practice? Any of the Fens lakes that allow you to have a kayak? Like, well, one good thing is go to Parklands and Floyd and go on the right there. There's a couple of put-ins where the water is not moving that swift and it's shallow, and paddle up and down there. Go upstream, go downstream, and flip your boat. Floyd's Fork would be, Parklands and Floyd's a great place because it's also, you have all kinds of infrastructure. So as you get into paddling, that'd be a great place to learn, to cut your teeth in Jefferson County. Let's go to the Parklands. It's got everything you need. It's got lakes, and it has plenty of access spots. There's a couple of ramps left over from when it was a different park. And you could put in, paddle upstream a little bit, paddle downstream a little bit, and intentionally flip your kayak. But also any of those small lakes, McNeely is really popular kayaking lake in the southern part of the county. So any of those fishing and neighborhood lakes in Jefferson County will work great. But if you want everything at once, go to the Parklands. You got it all. So now there's another thing about the paddle I'd like to talk about is the proper grip. A lot of people grab a paddle. I'm going to set it at, I'm going to pretend I'm on Elmer Davis. I'll set my feathering at 45 degrees right. Now, it's going to be hard to do because my paddle is longer than my neck. But there's a thing called a paddler's box. And when you grab a paddle, you want to, Nathan taught me this and it's worked really well. Make a circle right here and practice paddling a few strokes with just this, without putting your fingers down. That gives you a feel and the nuance of the paddle flexing, and it'll give you the feel of the proper grip. But then put your fingers, don't grab it like this. Spread your fingers out, move them more on, and then put that thumb up there. Then you get more power. You get more power and you get more grip. Doing this all day will make your hands tired by the end of the day. You make thousands of strokes. And buy the lightest paddle that you can afford. Okay. Over the course of 1,000 strokes, I think I read like a couple of ounces means like hundreds of pounds less weight you've moved over the course of a day just by saving a few ounces on your paddle. So I've cut this now. The paddler's box basically is if you move your arms at that angle away from your chest and you put it up there, that's where your hands should be on the paddle, right there. Not too close, then you don't have power, or you don't have control rather. If you go too far, you don't have power. So again, that's kind of I guess a parallelogram right here. From this line up through the paddle, that is your paddler's box. And that's the way you want to hold a paddle. I see people doing this crap all the time. No good. You're going to be tired and you're going to have V-power. And if you get into a rapid and you need to move your boat quickly, the little spaghetti leg too close together, the spaghetti arm too close together is going to mean you won't have any control of your boat. So practice your paddler's box. And when you paddle, it's not an egg beater. I see people doing that all the time. The paddle stroke is with the big muscles of your back and with your torso. You want to reach out and grab that water. Pull the paddle down alongside your boat and come out and do it on the other side. Grab that water. Reach out as far as you can grab and pull it down using your big muscles of your back and of your torso. If your arms are tired, your hands are tired, and your shoulders are tired after you've been paddling, your technique is poor. Practice with the paddler's box and using your core and the big muscles of your back to power the boat. It's not an arm stroke. It's not a shoulder stroke. It's not a hand stroke. It's a back and torso stroke. Plus, it's really good exercise. It'll build up your muscles down there, but that gives you much more power, much more efficiency. Once I started learning the proper technique using my paddler's box, my speed picked up tremendously and effort went down, speed went up. That's a good combination to have. So don't do that. You see it on the TV commercials. It's like the people, you see politicians saying, I hunt and fish, and they're holding a spinning rod upside down and reeling backwards. I was like, no, I do not think you fish. And when you see people on commercials for medicines or whatever, and they've got egg beater and they don't have a paddler's box and their blade is upside down and backwards, you realize they don't paddle. So to me, that credibility for that product, you know, if you're not going to take the time to at least have your actors learn the very basics, I don't know if I like your product or not. So, and if a politician is holding a spinning reel upside down and reeling backwards, I'm not voting for you. So again, practice proper technique. There's a lot of information online. I wrote an article for Kentucky Afield a couple of years ago on proper paddling strokes. There's plenty of different information on different strokes that you can use. There's all kinds of the J stroke and such, draw and pull. There's all these different strokes, but get the basics of the paddler's box, the proper grip, and using your torso and back, not your shoulders and hands. Because when you see those people on the commercial doing their egg beater with their paddle upside down and backwards, don't look at them. They don't know what they're doing. Are there any other questions, Andrew?
I don't see any more. I have a few to help kind of guide us here a little bit. Okay. What things do you take with you? Yeah. Well, that's the same ones we've had.
Okay, cool.
What things do you take with you every float? Like, it doesn't matter if it's 3 miles, 6 mile. What are the things you always take?
That's something I should have covered. That's very good, Andrew. First, bring plenty of water and buy one of those little waterproof first aid kits and just stick it in the storage hole of your boat and never take it out unless you're using it. That way it's there. Always bring a good flashlight and better a waterproof flashlight. Princeton Tech and a couple others make really good lights designed for kayak fishing that are good for 100 feet deep, waterproof. And the battery power lasts for years. I mean, you can float all year on one set of batteries on some of these LEDs. But even if you get the $5 cheapie, get a waterproof one. And if it's cheap enough, just keep it in your boat. Another thing to bring that I don't do enough of is you want to bring, some people bring a spare paddle. If you're going overnight or you're going on a long distance float, a spare paddle might happen in case you have a mishap with your other paddle, you lose part of it. It blows away in the wind, things happen. So, and always, you must wear your PFD, even when it's hot. If you're floating moving water, wear your PFD. Now, friends of mine have the inflatables that are like belts. You don't even know they're on. You hit it, it blows up, you put it over your head. A PFD that's stuck in your hull storage isn't going to do you much good when you need it. Could you imagine flipping and trying to figure out how to put a PFD when you're trying to save your boat, save your fishing poles, not drown, all these things, and you're trying to put a PFD on? If it's already on, you don't have to worry. So, water, food, first aid kit, flashlight, always. Even's like, well, we're going to take out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You never know what can happen. There's been many times I planned to take off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was using my flashlight because we didn't get there till 9. So, and it was dark. Always bring a flashlight. Just keep one in your boat. Find a waterproof one that's affordable for you, keep in your boat at all times. A spare paddle is good, and wear your PFD. But bring plenty of water too. I've had people, and they bring like 8 ounces of water, and we're paddling 7 miles in July. And I've had to give waters away because people bring like those little bitty ones. That's not enough. You'll need you want to bring at least a liter of water. You expel a lot of energy when you're paddling. Getting in and out of the boats and all, you'll feel it the next day. You'll be sometimes sore. So you need your water. First aid kit, water, flashlight, PFD, and spare paddle. I don't do that as much as I should, but I need to get a spare paddle.
Would you should just bring in a change of clothes with you in a dry bag or anything?
If you're going on some water that has some good rapids, that's another thing. I rarely do. I forget it all the time. But smart people, unlike me, get a dry bag, and you can find them at the department store, at any of the outfitters like Cabela's or a place like that. They're called a dry bag. And you could put a pair of pants, shorts, spare t-shirt, some dry socks. A lot of people like to bring dry socks to change into after they've been on the water all day and their feet are wet. I'll tell a little story. My wife and I were floating, and this is only the second time she'd ever floated. And it was in October. And she's turned out to be an excellent paddler. She can read water well. She knows she's an athlete. She knows how to use her secondary stability. And a spider came down a tree. And all she saw was the spider. She hates spiders. They scare her to death. She panicked, forgot she was in the boat, jumped out of the boat. And I look up and I was like, why is the boat upside down? Oh, so I had to go after her. I saved her fishing pole. I saved her water. And she had her PFD on. It immediately took her head out of the water, put her feet in front of her. She floated over to the side. No harm done. The handle of the fishing pole broke off. I fixed it one day and everything was fine. But her PFD saved her. The water was cold. And PFDs also, when it gets cool, can give you some insulation as well. And the ones designed for kayaks are really comfortable. So she put the PFD on. Her clothes were soaked. It was October. By the end of the day, she was getting a little cold, but she handled it. She had her PFD on. She got out of the water quickly. What could have been a disaster turned out to be not that big a deal at all. Okay. Dry bags look like this. Yes. And there's tons of them.
Walmart's got some that I've bought that work pretty well. I mean, they don't have to be expensive.
Yeah, you don't have to spend a fortune on them. One thing I will also, a lot of people like to bring their cell phone on the float. Great. Get a good waterproof case. Ziploc bags aren't it. Do not put anything that you want to keep dry, even if it's the double Ziploc. They're not worth a hoot. I was floating Cumberland River during the drawback years ago. Best fishing day I've ever had for trout, ever. Caught a brown over 20 and a rainbow that was 23 inches. Incredible day, glory day. Midway through the day, we had just a pop-up thunderstorm that rained like crazy for about 20 minutes. And I put back then my little flip phone, double bagged it in a Ziploc bag and sealed it real good, make sure get all the air out. I pulled it up and my phone there was that much water in my phone. And when I pulled it out, it looked like one of those things you see on people's desks where the water goes back and forth. That's what my screen looked like when I moved it back and forth. Was the water moving back and forth in my screen? That phone was junk. Get a good waterproof phone holder. I have the plastic box that clamps down with a rubber seal. I've dropped it in the river, creek a million times. It's never leaked once. They're great. So don't use Ziplocs to save your phone or anything valuable, or any clothes you want to keep dry. Ziploc bags for that. They're great for keeping food in the fridge. They're not worth a hoot for keeping stuff dry on the float. Also, you may want to bring some waterproof matches and just keep them in your boat. I have a fire striking kit or matches in both of my kayaks, just in case. You never know, especially if it's fall or if it's spring floating, you need to make a fire. You just never know. So again, be prepared.
My other thing that we need to cover is if you go to a lake, it's really easy to go to the boat ramp by yourself and unload your boat and park your car. Now, how do you plan vehicles, pick up, drop off vehicle, and then if you're by yourself, what do you do?
Well, that's shuttling is an art. And I've done it a lot, and that's I get complimented all the time. People say, Lee, you've done this a few times. I was like, yes, because I've screwed up shuttles and I forgot to put behind my buddy who had the takeout vehicle. Oh man, you better put your keys in the glove box. Okay, because we don't want to lose them on the phone. We had to call a friend and save our butt. So thank God we had a phone. I had a phone. We called our friend and thank God he was home and saved our rear end. So it's really two people. What I typically do, and it depends on your vehicle. I have a pickup with a long bed. I can fit 2 boats in there, Jim. What we usually do is there's 2 people and 2 vehicles. Okay, and we'll go through the different scenarios. We'll drive we'll meet at the takeout. We'll take one of the boats, put it back either in their truck or their vehicle or my truck, and then we'll drive to the put-in, and then we'll float back to the takeout. And then usually we leave my truck at the takeout because we can fit them. Then you load the boats back in, drive to the put-in, have your other partner unload their boat, put it in their vehicle, and go home. That's how you do that. Now, if you have smaller vehicles that can't accommodate 2 boats, it gets a little tricky. That's when it's good to have a third person who can watch the boats. If you have a third person, you drop the boats off at the put-in, you have the other vehicle that for the takeout, you have someone follow you, you go to the takeout, drop off the vehicle, get in the other vehicle, drive to the put-in, and fish back to the takeout. And then have that third person watch the 3 boats, go back to the put-in, grab the other vehicle, drive to the takeout, everybody loads their boats in the vehicle, and you go to the house. With single, that's really hard because you have to, it's difficult. One of the things that's happened on Elkhorn Creek and other creeks is there are outfitters who will run a shuttle for you, maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe $10. And they'll drive you, drop off your vehicle at the takeout, drive you and your boat to the put-in, and float to the takeout. One of the reasons that I don't do a lot of it because I don't recommend people paddle alone, whether it be flat water or whether it be the stream. You really, a motorboat's one thing. You've got a trolling motor, it's big. Kayaks are a different story. Kayaks flip, things can happen. You can lose your paddle. So I don't really recommend you paddle alone a lot. And when I paddle alone, it's usually on flat water, but you can either contact someone who will run a shuttle for you, have a friend run a shuttle for you. What I've seen some people do is if you only have one vehicle, drop off the boat at the put-in and chain it. But that means you're going to have to be able to somehow transport yourself from the takeout back to the put-in. So without using another person, 1-person shuttles for doing a stream float, very difficult. For flat water, you just go to the ramp, get in flat, come back. But again, I don't recommend that you paddle with 1 person. You really want to paddle with 2 people, especially if you're on a moving stream. Now, if you have 3 or more people, you're fine. 1 person can watch the stuff while you run the shuttle. So just don't be stupid. Remember your keys. Remember where they're at. Who's got them? Remember your wallet. Remember your keys. Don't leave stuff in the takeout or put-in vehicle that you'll need on the float. Do a double check before you leave saying, do I have my paddle? Do I have everything? Because if you leave something in the truck and you take off on the stream, you're not going back upstream. So you're stuck that day without that important item you may need. So double check. If you have 3 people, it's easy. If you have 2, go to the put-in, load them all up in 1 vehicle, drive to the takeout, float back home, load both boats in the takeout vehicle, drive to the put-in, everybody loads up their own vehicle, head to the house.
Thanks. So that's always something that catches a lot of people. They're like, so how do I get my boat back and forth?
Well, if you're by yourself, it's really hard unless you have a friend or you can walk. Like there's a float on Elkhorn that you could put a vehicle at the takeout, chain your boat, and carry your paddle and PFD and all that stuff with you. And it'll be probably 10-minute, 15-minute walk. A lot of people on the Cumberland River, they put in at what is known as the Rock House. They float around to Winfrey's Ferry, and it's like a 1.5 mile drive, or maybe 2. It's like 10, 15, 20-minute walk. And they do that, but you have to, some people will chain a bicycle at the takeout and then ride their bike up and get their now that you can do that. A lot of people at Parklands of Floyd do that. If you're by yourself and you can get a cheap bicycle and you have room to store it, you can use the bicycle to get back to the vehicle at the put in or to get to the takeout. So by yourself, a bicycle will come in handy. But then again, you're gonna have to leave your boat alone sometimes. So if you're by yourself on a stream, there's just no easy way to do a shuttle on a stream if you're by yourself. A lot of people do, I forgot, a lot of people use a bicycle. But again, you're gonna have to chain the bicycle up and then chain your boat up while you retrieve your vehicle.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight. I don't see any other questions coming up, but I had something that I came up with. You were using some terms that I don't think everybody understands. You're using portage. What exactly does that mean for people who don't know?
Okay, I don't mean to speak inside baseball. I apologize. Portaging is when you have to get out and carry your boat around a hairy object. Sometimes you have to portage really, really hairy rapids, like the famous Devil's Jump Rapid on the Big South Fork of the Cumberland River. A lot of people portage that. People who with really good skills don't. They go through. But a lot of people will carry their boat around that. Lowhead Dam, you have to portage. That means you have to get out, manually carry your boat around the obstruction and put in downstream. That's what portaging means.
Sounds like another good reason
means
to have help.
that's the process of getting the vehicles ready. Running the shuttle means going between the takeout and the put in to get the vehicles ready so you can enjoy your float. The term for that is the shuttle. So are there any other terms that
you used pick a line one time?
I used what?
Pick a line?
Yes. Well, when you're floating and you're coming on a stream, I'm glad you brought that up because we can go over something really quick. When you're on a stream, you're going to encounter rapids. Most of them, a lot of them are mild, some of them are hairy. When you go through the rapid, that's called picking your line, the way you feel to navigate through that rapid. There is a thing known as the tongue, which is the fattest part of the rapid going through the rocks. That's called the tongue of the rapid. Generally, 90% of the time, you want to choose the tongue to get into the rapid. And then you'll have to think and negotiate and maneuver to avoid rocks and pick the proper line. If you see white water doing like that, that's an underwater obstruction. You want to avoid those. And if you have some really big standing waves that you think may swamp you, you want to avoid those. So pick the proper line to avoid trouble. That's what they're talking about, is picking your line through the rapid. So if you go down the tongue, which is the most flow through the rapid, that's to be at the top of the rapid. Pick the tongue and you've made the right choice 90% of the time. And again, if you're inexperienced and you come across a rapid that intimidates you, get out and carry it around. Another item I forgot to mention. Always, always, always make a rope for your boat. I take that nice braided polyethylene rope you see that's pretty and colored and about that thick and smooth to the hand. Get about a 6-foot section of that and tie 2 carabiners to each end. Okay, so you can snap those to the handle of your kayak, and then you snap another to your pants or just wrap it around your hand, and then you can walk your boat through a rapid hands free. Okay, and if you have to drag your boat over shallow shoals, if you have to move it through an obstruction or whatever, mainly it's usually a rapid or dragging it over a shallow shoal, that rope comes in handy. You don't want to be stooped over, grabbing your handle and trying to walk at that angle, going through a really rocky, uneven, jaggedy stretch of stream. That's no good. But if you have a rope, it's attached to a belt loop or your belt or something, or it's wrapped around your hand, you can walk through and keep one hand free and let the boat flow through the rapid. I mean, I have to get out and walk all the time. Usually in the summer, it gets too low. You'll be in the middle of the rapid. You hit a rock you didn't see, and then your boat gets stuck. That is really no fun if you don't have a rope. So that is an essential item with the flashlight. Make a rope of that soft polyethylene rope that holds at least 100 pounds. Put 2 carabiners on the end, bigger carabiners. That way you can wrap it up. I keep mine around the handle in the front of my boat the entire time I'm floating. So I can grab it quickly. If I need to get out and bail and let the boat go through, I can do it. Or if the rapid's too beyond my skill level, Go over to the side, try to find a place you can walk through and walk your boat through, letting the boat always go first. You never want the boat behind you, because if you fall, that boat's going to come over and hit you in the head. You always want the boat in front of you and the boat pulling on you. So a rope is wonderful. Now you can just tie a piece of rope if you want to, but the carabiners are nice. And that fat rope doesn't, that cheap yellow rope that's rough, tears your hands up when they get soaked. I get dishpan hands real bad. So after my hands have been wet all day, they kind of rough on your hands. Get that smooth, nice rope. That's about a 1/4 inch back.
Yeah, thanks for the insight there. Now, I do have a question I want to address that we've had somebody ask for 2 webinars now. I don't know if they're with us or not, but I believe they were asking about a particular float trip below Nolin Dam down to Brownsville. So give us some of your knowledge on that.
Okay. What's happened is that part of the Green River is undergoing change. A long time ago, back in the steamboat era, they built 6 locks and dams on Green River. And they did it so late that by the time they really were, like that one lock 6, I mean, it was only functionally useful for maybe 30 years. And as railroads and highways came along, the steamboat era passed, and we have the legacy of these low head dams that really don't, that they have a lock chamber and you could lock boats through. Several years ago, they removed Lock and Dam 6, which is right outside of the right on the border of the Mammoth Cave National Park. It created a flat water section that went well up past Pouchin's Ferry. If you've ever been down to Mammoth Cave, you'll know Houchin's Ferry. However, that lock and dam failed through nature. So the Corps of Engineers came in and they took it out. So now that used to back up Nolin River for quite a ways, almost all the way to the dam, that Lock and Dam 6, because the mouth of the Nolin hits before Lock and Dam 6. You'll go past it. If you put in a Houchin's Ferry now and float around to Brownsville, which I've done, you'll go by the Nolin River. However, now the Nolin River is back in its historic shape, which is much smaller. When I saw it, but it's been a couple of years ago, there was a lot of logs and debris in Nolin at the mouth. And I heard that it was kind of stickly and a lot of that all the way up through there. Now, floods and whatnot have probably blasted quite a bit of that out, but it's not nearly as deep as it once was. So you put in at Nolin there at the dam, at Dismal, it's called Dismal Rock, it's pretty. And then you'll go a couple miles, then you'll hit the main green, you'll take a right, and you're going to float around to Brownsville and take out at the ramp in downtown Brownsville. Again, it's on our Blue Water Trails page. There's an excellent map. You can look and see where Nolin comes in, how far you have to go around to the takeout in the community of Brownsville. It's in Edmonson County. So you're going to see a river that's about 1/3 of what it was before the dam came out. Personally, for me, I'm glad to see it because the green is so biologically diverse and beautiful, and I love it, and I floated it, and I just love Green River. So seeing it revert back to its natural state is for me is good. Some people may not agree with that, that's fine, but I like it. What started this week is the beginning of demolition of Lock and Dam 5 on Green River, which is the next Lock and Dam down from 6. It's pretty well down. So it's really going to change that section. It's going to lower the river there again in that section from Nolin down to Brownsville. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen because the smallmouth bass and the flowing stream species are going to increase exponentially in that whole stretch of Mammoth Cave. It's going to return it the way it looked like before they built those dams. So for the ecological life of the cave and for all the, there's so many subterranean rivers down through that part of the world, this will help them return to their natural state and will clean them up a little bit. It's a good thing. So plan on a long float. You may have to portage. You may have to drag over some fallen trees in the Nolin River part because it's about half the size it once was. Then once you hit Green River, it's nothing. You'll be around the Brownsville in no time.
Thanks, Lee. Do we have any other questions?
I saw another chat come up, but I don't know if that's a question.
Yeah, don't see it myself. So well, I think that's it, Lee. I appreciate you
No problem.
talking to us. You can think of anything else you'd like to cover before we go?
Again, practice before you get on the water. Don't bite off more than you can chew. It's better to go shorter, less hairy water until you learn. It doesn't take long to get proficient at paddle. It just takes practice. So, but the number one thing, if it's up in the trees, it's flowing like chocolate milk. There's tree branches. Go home. It's no fun to float in that anyway. You can't swim. It's it's kind of gross. It's muddy dirt, muddy water. You can't swim. And the other thing is, if you do get in that situation, the tree branches that come down or anything sticking up, these are called another paddling term, strainers. So if you hit a strainer and the river is up and moving fast and muddy, you'll flip like that. And never, ever grab a tree because you're scared. Because guess what's going to happen? Your boat's going to go right out from underneath of you, and all you're going to have is a tree branch, and your boat is booking downstream. Don't grab any tree branches. Avoid any trees or strainers if you get stuck, if you get in a situation where the water is muddy and high. Avoid this. Avoid any snags and avoid getting in the trees. Stay in the middle and keep your wits about you. But the best thing to do is find another stream to float that day if you can, if it's all blown out. But again, if you do your study, you look at the stream gauge, you look at the flows, you put a little time in, you'll know pretty much what the stream's like. So you can avoid driving 2 hours to a mud ball, which I've done back in the day before I knew what I know now. I've had to turn around and go back home, put my kayak up because the stream was blown out. So, and if you see an area you're uncomfortable with, you see a rapid that scares you, it's beyond your skill level, walk around it or walk through it. It's not a macho ego, I'm better than everybody test. It's a fun day. One of the things that Nathan Deppenbrock always said is kayaking is fun, but it's inherently dangerous, and it is. You can drown. So if you're scared, if you're intimidated by a particular stretch, get out and go around. You're not less of a person if you use common good sense and judgment.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee.
No problem.
If nobody else has any questions, we'll wrap up here. I would like to, first of all, thank everybody for joining us for this series. I'd also like to point out our kayak giveaway. Take somebody new fishing. You can take them on a kayak float if you want, but just get them out there and learning. Oh yeah, it's real nice.
They have a Warner paddle like mine. That's a good package.
Yeah, it's a $1,000 package. You'll get life jacket, paddle, fishing rod and reel, and the new person you take will also get a rod and reel as well. So basically, you just take somebody brand new to fishing, so they've never bought a license in their life or hasn't bought a license in the last 3 years. You'll log on to the department's webpage and go to your My Profile where we keep track of all your licenses. You can buy your new one for the year if you need to. Enter their license number, and you get a chance to win the boat. And the more people you take, the more chances you get. So I just always like to point that out.
If you look at that PFD there, that's a kayak style PFD. You'll notice that it's raised up. That's to fit behind that seat. It'll fit over the top of it. And you notice there's not a ton of stuff, so they're not nearly as hot. And they provide great buoyancy. So that PFD is your buddy. It's your friend.
I will say there's also a lot of good pictures of them on the webinar that we did with Canoe Kentucky. We took a picture of their whole wall. And so you'll see lots of different styles that you can pick their own with different pockets and organizers.
Yeah, mine's very similar to that Astro. I've got a Stokewitz. And the pockets actually fold down, and I can make like a little table where I can put lures on and rig up stuff, and it's pretty cool.
So, well, thanks everybody for joining us. If you've got any other questions or anything, just reach out to the info center here at the department. We'll try to get you guided to the right place. Use those resources Lee showed you. Plan your next float trip, and good luck and be safe. Thanks, everybody.
Go have fun. It's a wonderful thing. Just use some sense. All right.